from the Power Rangers franchise take a turn writing their characters in Power Rangers Across the Morphin Grid #1. So this is a collection of short stories that are written, or in some cases co-written, by actors from the Power Rangers franchise about their characters. So David Yost, who played Billy the Blue Ranger, he gets a story. Walter Jones, who played Zack the Black Ranger, he gets a story, etc., etc. Whenever actors jump on a comic book project like this, I always wonder how much writing they're actually doing, compared to a co-author they might have, or an editor they might be working with. Like, for instance, I thought that when Iman Vellani jumped on Ms. Marvel. But it is somewhat curious to note that David Yost, Walter Jones, and Megan Camarena, I think is how you pronounce the name, the Hyperforce Pink Ranger, all apparently did their projects without co-authors. Yost writes a story about Billy taking possession of the Power Eggs, which were a MacGuffin from an early episode of Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. I did not realize that the Power Eggs were as powerful as they are. The Walter Jones story is very positive, very upbeat, very much the kind of thing you would expect to come from Walter Jones. Nakia Burrise, the actress who played the Yellow Zeo Ranger, contributes a story about her character and the Adam character, ultimately answering the question of whether or not they ever became a couple. I'm not sure I buy the answer that we ultimately get from that story, but you know what? Nakia Burrise has more insight into the Tanya and Adam characters than I do, so what do I know? Steve Cardenas, the actor who played Rocky, actually steals the issue with a story he co-writes about Rocky's younger sister getting to take a turn as the Red Ranger. Wouldn't necessarily have called that, but hey, I'll take it. Because Power Rangers Hyperforce was a web series that obviously had a fraction of the audience compared to the main series, especially at its height, Megan Camarena's story about the Pink Hyperforce Ranger doesn't necessarily land as well as the others do, but it is very charming from both a writing and an artistic standpoint, and that must be said. Perhaps not surprisingly, the variant cover game for this issue is really strong. We have two from Goni Montez. One is one of his trademark helmet covers. The other spotlights the Yellow Zeo Ranger, which is cool because that character doesn't necessarily get a lot of love. Matt Taylor also gives us a really cool Zeo cover. It's always nice to see seasons of the show that aren't Mighty Morphin Power Rangers getting some love and a spotlight. As much as we all love Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, I think most diehard fans would admit it's a little overexposed compared to the other seasons. Between this issue and Amy Jo Johnson's work on Mighty Morphin Power Rangers The Return, I'm loving this trend of actors from the show coming in to work on their characters. If I'm the person or the people at Boom Studios in charge of the work with the Power Rangers license, I want to do more of this. Not only do I want to bring these people back, but I want to reach out to other actors. I want to bring the Power Rangers in Space actors in, or the Power Rangers Lost Galaxy actors, or how about Paul Schreier and Jason Narvi, the guys who played Bulk and Skull? They'd be good. This kind of issue is especially nice to get in an era where for the first time in 30 years, we don't have a new season of Power Rangers on the air. The show has been canceled. There's a lot of love for the Power Rangers franchise out there. Somebody should slip that memo to Hasbro. And this issue is a really nice tribute to that. Oh, man. Whew. Absolute Superman #1 is a tough issue to get through. Today, of all days, the day after election 2024. I actually mean that in a good way. This issue is powerful and poignant and relevant, but it's powerful, poignant, and relevant for different reasons than it would have been had Kamala Harris won the election, in my opinion. Perhaps you'll see what I mean. In Absolute Superman #1, we find out that when Jor-El and Lara, Superman's parents, were alive on Krypton, there was a definitive line between the upper class, the ruling class, and the lower class, the serving class of people. Both Jor-El and Lara had opportunities to be in the upper class, but because they spoke out and were honest, they ended up in the lower class, the serving class. We also find out that the planet Krypton was destroyed because of an environmental crisis that was largely ignored by the upper class scientists. Jor-El, though, as a lower class scientist, was warning people about it. And then in the present day on Earth, we find Superman amongst a group of miners who are being forced to inhale asbestos as they work by their big corporate bosses, which is, of course, hazardous to their health. Everybody getting this so far? The book also does something kind of interesting with Lois Lane, but that doesn't really factor in too heavily to what we get in this issue. Our penciler, Rafa Sandoval, delivers a career performance here. Really proud of him for what he accomplishes with this issue. He's been turning in great work for a long time. You know, Superman was created in the 1930s by two Jewish boys as a champion for the downtrodden and the oppressed, as somebody who used his superpowers to cut through corruption and greed. This issue, as much as any other opening statement I've ever read on Superman, really captures that fighter for the underdog spirit of the character. And quite frankly, that's largely the Superman that we need right now. I'm somebody who's been critical of our author Jason Aaron's work in other places and at other times, but I am really proud of him for what he accomplished with this issue and what I hope he continues to accomplish with this Absolute Superman book. You know, again, the timing of the release of this book, coming out the day after Election Day, is a little too perfect for me. I can't help but wonder if DC did that on purpose, and if they did do it on purpose, whether that was a good decision or a bad decision. I guess maybe it depends on your perspective. Oliver Queen embraces his role as a grandfather, or I guess at least a surrogate grandfather, in Green Arrow 2024 Annual. So my understanding is that this is the last issue for our author Joshua Williamson, and I guess just this crop of creators in general. So we flash forward into the future, and we see Ollie as an older man looking back on his career as Green Arrow. But he's with a bunch of kids who we're told are the children of a bunch of other heroes and some villains too. They don't tell us exactly who the kids' parents are, but there are hints. Green Arrow is kind of a grandfather in theory. His apprentice Roy Harper has a daughter named Leanne, so he's kind of a surrogate grandfather in that respect. And I like that we have future Ollie in this issue, sort of embracing that grandfatherly, paternal sort of role. I think DC should lean further into the whole Grandpa Green Arrow thing, honestly. That's something different you can do with Green Arrow as opposed to, say, a Batman or a Wonder Woman, because Green Arrow doesn't have that cultural icon status that those other characters have. I also just like the whole family approach that we're getting here on the Green Arrow side of things, and the way that Green Arrow's surrogate family seems a lot tighter knit than, say, Batman's surrogate family. Our artists here are Sean Izaxi and Amanke Noelpan. I'm so sorry if I'm mispronouncing those names. But they really get to go wild here and draw Green Arrow in a variety of different scenarios, a variety of different versions of the character. It's really fun to see. A new era begins next issue with a new creative team, and I will be reading, so I'm curious to see what we get. A new era for Power Rangers comic books begins, hopefully, with Power Rangers Prime #1. So earlier this year, the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers ongoing series at Boom Studios ended. And you know what? It's just as well for my money, because that book needed a creative shakeup as far as I'm concerned. Power Rangers Prime is, I hope, the creative shakeup I've been looking for. The book takes place several decades in the future, and we find out that Earth has been colonized by the planet Eltar. What's kind of interesting about that is that Eltar is the homeworld of Zordon, the mentor for the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, the original Power Rangers. Curiously, we find that under this new regime, Power Rangers are considered outlaws. And amidst this environment, we find Lauren Sheba, an underused character from Power Rangers Samurai. I presume she's been temporarily displaced somehow, but we don't find that out for sure yet. And stop me if you've heard this one before, but the Earth is about to come under an otherworldly threat, and it looks like Power Rangers are going to have to rise up to fight it. This is an interesting shakeup, at least at first glance. It looks like they're really going to give our author Melissa Flores a chance to run wild with the Power Rangers universe and Power Rangers concepts and ideas, etc. I appreciate that the Lauren Sheba character is here. Power Rangers Samurai isn't regarded as an amazing season by diehard fans or anything like that, but I think the general consensus is that character could have gone further. We could have done more with her. The art and colors have a really nice energy to them. Our penciler here is an artist who I don't want to disrespect, so I'm not going to try to pronounce his name. One thing I can appreciate here is the lack of what I will call Mighty Morphin window dressing. Because Mighty Morphin Power Rangers was such a phenomenon in the 90s and is to this day the most well-known iteration of the Power Rangers license, the franchise and the license tend to lean heavily into the Mighty Morphin stuff, understandably, I guess. This book doesn't seem to be doing that, though. There are variant covers with the Mighty Morphin Rangers on them, but there's no indication that the Rangers we will eventually get in this series will be the Mighty Morphin Rangers. You know what I mean? I was initially skeptical about this Power Rangers Prime book, but I'm pretty happy with what we got from the first issue. So I really hope that Power Ranger fans like me will show up for this book and at least give it a shot. I think that Hasbro canceling the TV show and subsequently auctioning off 30 years worth of costumes and props from the show really indicates where their head is at as far as the Power Rangers brand is concerned. So we as Power Ranger fans really need to show up for this brand, this franchise, this thing that we love, wherever and whenever we can. And this Power Rangers Prime book is as good a place to do that as any. FML is modern slang. It's an acronym that means F my life. So it's what I said after the election last week. Am I right? But FML #1 is a new comic book about the lifetimes and adventures of a group of high school kids who are into metal. And if there's one person who's qualified to talk about metal, it's me. Someone's bald dad standing in his basement talking to his phone about comic books while wearing a Bluey hoodie. Yeah. So this issue takes place about 15 to 20 years in the future, and I don't really want to tell you what it's about because we don't really find out what this issue and this book are about until the very end. We spend most of this first issue setting up our characters and our world and our tone. And this book's vision of the near future is, I'm going to say, cynical. For instance, the book takes place during a pandemic, and we get a little taste of what the local politicians stand for. I really don't mean to keep bringing it up, but this book really made me think of the election. I don't know, maybe it's just on my mind. Performed music in comics, with the lyrics written out, usually doesn't work for me. I don't know if it works for other people, but it just doesn't translate well off the written page. But I will say that we open the issue with our main character playing a song, a metal song. And it works about as well as any musical sequence that I've ever seen in a comic book. I think it's because the lyrics are very cutting and very poignant. There's a character in this book, like a bully character, whose name is Uzi. Uzi, U-Z-I, as in a gun. Boy, was that depressing to read, because you just know that there are a pair of bumpkins in this country who named their kid something like Uzi or Glock or some weird gun-worshipping name like that. My only hope is that wherever that kid is in the world, he never comes into contact with either of my kids, because then when my kids ask me what the name Uzi means, I'm going to have to explain to them America's fetishization, and it is fetishization, with guns and firearms. Did I get off topic? Nah, maybe I got off topic. So after reading Black Lightning #1, I sort of have this idea. It's an idea that I think would make a lot of people uncomfortable, and I think a lot of people would say it's too woke. But I think it's a good idea, and I think it's an idea that could generate some really interesting, moving stories. And I'm going to tell you what the idea is in just a minute. So in this book, Black Lightning is the head of metahuman outreach for the Justice League. In the aftermath of absolute power, new metahumans have been manifesting powers all over the place, and Black Lightning is responsible for finding them and helping them grow accustomed to and use their powers. It's a very X-Men-ish concept, I guess. So we see one such case with a metahuman teen play out in this issue. Black Lightning also has 2 superhero daughters, Lightning and Thunder, and there's some drama going on with them. Jefferson Pierce, Black Lightning, our main character here, is almost ridiculously likable. He's a teacher, he's involved in community outreach, he's a single dad, but he gets along with his ex-wife, he's a superhero. You see what I'm getting at? And there's a lot of great drama that you can mine from all of that stuff to create a book that's really positive and, I guess, progressive. I just wonder whether or not this book will sell. I hope it sells. It deserves to sell. But it feels like Black Lightning is one of those characters that DC is always trying to do things with, but it never quite pans out into anything too noteworthy. Either way, though, Black Lightning is worth your time, and I hope you'll at least give it a look. Alright, so here's my idea. And you know what? I don't even know if I'm the right person to pitch this, but I'm just going to put it out there. We live in a post-George Floyd world where the Black Lives Matter movement very much needs to exist and racial tensions are pretty high. I think that DC should do a book that speaks to those issues and what's happening on that side of our culture. I don't know what you call it, but for lack of a better title, I would basically have it be a Black Justice League book. Have it be a team affiliated with the Justice League at large, but have a bunch of black hero characters basically say, alright, we're with you guys, but we're also going to come over here and do our own thing. You could have Black Lightning in the book, but you could also use Steel and Cyborg and Mr. Terrific and the Ace West version of Kid Flash and the Signal from the Batman books. There's not exactly a booming number of black female heroes in the DC universe right now, but you could put Vixen in there and you could put Naomi in there, and you know what? Hey, create some new black female heroes. How about that? And of course, DC could recruit a bunch of black creators to do the book. You know who'd be good at it from a writing standpoint is John Ridley, who did the other history of the DC Universe. I don't know if DC has ever done a strictly black superhero team book, but in 2024, I think it could be really interesting to try. I don't know how well it would sell, but I'd give it a look. Just saying. Somebody burns books in the pages of Geiger number 8. And if you know me, you know I've got something to say about that. So in this issue, some children lead our heroes back to a community that kind of looks pre-apocalyptic, like it still has some of the amenities that people did before nuclear war, I guess. It's kind of reminiscent of one of the episodes of The Walking Dead, or perhaps more aptly, one of the issues of The Walking Dead, where the group comes across a similar kind of community that's really put together and kind of seems too good to be true. But of course, not all is as rosy as it appears to be. We've got a leader/sheriff type character who's trying to control the way the kids in the community see the world and learn. So as such, we see him burn some books in a scene. The burning of books is a powerful statement to make, whether in the real world or in a story. It's a powerful statement to make in this story. It's not obscene from a visual standpoint, but it's definitely obscene from an intellectual standpoint. To me, it's more obscene than anything you might see in a porno film, for instance. Our author, Geoff Johns, gets a lot of creative storytelling mileage out of that one moment in this issue, which is a good thing because we don't have a lot of time with these people in this setting necessarily, the way we would in a Walking Dead story, like I mentioned. But yeah, that scene in this book was really piercing to me, and somewhat timely given all the buzz about what's going to happen in the world of education once we get into the new year and our new White House administration. Incidentally, if you've never read Fahrenheit 451 by Ray Bradbury, which is a classic novel that's largely about book burning, I think now would be a good time to do that. That and 1984 by George Orwell. They've both been made into graphic novels, so if that's the flavor you'd rather go with, you can. Follow the money and then burn the money. A dramatic strategy to be sure, but as we see in Wonder Woman number 15, it does work pretty well. So in this issue, Wonder Woman is with her infant daughter as the Wonder Girls are going after the bad guys' financial assets. Cassandra Sandsmark in particular does so in spectacular fashion. I tell you what, say what you will about our author here, Tom King, and I have, but I love that he's making such effective use of the Cassandra Sandsmark version of Wonder Girl. He's really done right by her, maybe as much, if not more, than any writer since Geoff Johns back in the mid-2000s. That said, Tom King's work with the Wonder Girls isn't flawless per se, but he does make really effective use of them in this issue. But yeah, Wonder Woman's daughter is officially a thing now, in canon, in continuity. We knew that was coming, though, if you've been paying attention to this book. It was probably inevitable that Wonder Woman would get a daughter at some point, or at least a child, period. Superman has a son, Batman has a son. It just kind of makes logical sense for Wonder Woman to have a daughter, I guess. Whether this ends up being a good decision or a bad decision will ultimately depend on how not only Tom King and this creative team use her, but subsequent creative teams as the years go by. Our backup story here sees Steve Trevor in the Greek mythological afterlife. That's kind of interesting. You know, getting back to the Wonder Girls, I really like this idea of them as a team. The execution in this book hasn't been flawless thus far, but I'd be interested in seeing more of them working together. And as you might have seen the other day when I talked about Black Lightning number 1, I basically pitched the idea of an all-black Justice League team. But, who's to say that Donna Troy, Cassandra Sandsmark, and Yara Flor couldn't be part of a young female Justice League team? And I mean, it doesn't just have to be them. You could throw Teen Lantern on there. You could throw Naomi on there. Cassandra Cain, although that might be a little confusing. But yeah, go the female empowerment route with the Justice League. They did a similar thing with the X-Men 10 years or so ago. It didn't last incredibly long, but they did it, and I appreciated it. Different takes on the Justice League don't always work, but they have worked. I mean, we've seen that with the Justice League International. We saw that with the Justice League Dark. And now that we've got this sort of Justice League Unlimited era coming up at DC, I really think that now could be a good time to try different things. I know there's a big portion of the audience that would call ideas like this too woke, and worst case scenario, you cancel the book, I guess. But I don't know. I mean, we are in the business of being creative here, right? Why not try something a little different? Just saying. The team comes together, officially this time, in Exceptional X-Men number 3. Do you guys know what Freytag's Pyramid is? I knew what it was, but I didn't know until today that it actually had a name attached to it. So basically, it's like your traditional map for dramatic structure in storytelling. You have your rising action, in which your drama, intrigue, and tension go up and up and up, and then you have your climax where it all comes to a head, and then you have your falling action. You've heard of this. Well, in Exceptional X-Men number 3, our rising action kind of takes a break so that we can do expository business. Like our new characters, our new X-Men, officially get their code names, they get their costumes, we decide where our superhero base is going to be. We even establish gender pronouns. That's a thing, fair enough. It's not ideal from a storytelling standpoint, I guess, but sometimes you just got to take care of business. Our author Eve Ewing does take this opportunity, though, to kind of play around with the characters and the character dynamics, so at least she's making effective use of this little stop that we're on. Our penciler Carmen Carnero is really good with Emma Frost, both in terms of her smug, snotty, catty facial expressions and some of her body language. That was a highlight for me on this issue. After reading Paranoid Gardens number 5, I think I'm ready to pay this book, this mini-series, a couple of pretty big compliments. So stick around for a couple of minutes if you want to know what they are. What's kind of funny about that is that from a writing standpoint, this is probably the least dramatic and intense issue that we've gotten from the book thus far. I don't mean that in the sense that the writing is bad. I mean that in the sense that, telling a story is kind of like riding a roller coaster. You have peaks and valleys, and in this issue, we're ramping up for the big climax that we're going to get, of course, in issue 6. Via some flashback scenes, we get a sense kind of who our main character Lou was before she came to this assisted living facility for aliens and monsters and weirdos, and how she ended up there in the first place, though we don't have all the answers yet. And the grayscale for the flashback scenes was a nice touch. I absolutely love the art and the colors on this book by Chris Weston and colorist Dave Stewart. The faces that they render, both human and alien, are very expressive, and I just love the detail and the texture they put into everything. You can almost get a sense of the leathery feel of the skin on these aliens/monsters. That factor has kind of been why Paranoid Gardens has been one of my favorite books to read this year. There's a tremendous sense of creativity and wonder, even, that come with this book. I hesitate to use this analogy because, frankly, it's so tired, but in a way I liken Paranoid Gardens to the Mos Eisley Cantina scene from the original Star Wars movie. I'm not saying they're the same, okay? I'm just saying there are similarities. They have a similar appeal, at least for me. I think Paranoid Gardens is a good, creative, compelling, interesting story that would work okay as like a traditional prose novel. But just like with the cantina scene, the experience is completely different when you can actually see the monsters and the creatures and the setting that they're in, and you can kind of immerse yourself in this world that engages your mind in a completely different way. Not necessarily a better way, but a different way. And that's part of why independently published comic books matter. Independent in this instance meaning that they don't come from the big two, Marvel or DC, who, let's be honest, mostly recycle and shuffle around superhero ideas. Because I don't know if Paranoid Gardens gets executed at such a high level if it's not a comic book. I don't know, some stories, I guess, were just inherently meant for this medium. And of course, that's part of why we all love it. In conclusion, you should read Paranoid Gardens. Did I say that? Do I need to say that? I feel like it's implied, but I'll just say it again. You should read Paranoid Gardens.